Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the City of Toronto's COVID-19 media briefing for Thursday, May 7th, 2020. Joining us today, Mayor John Tory, Toronto's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Eileen and Toronto Fire Chief and General Manager of the Office of Emergency Management, Matthew Pegg. Mr. Mayor?
Well, Brad, thank you and good afternoon. I'm going to start today by addressing the sidewalk quayside news that came out today. Toronto's economy will come back strong after COVID-19, and we will continue to be a magnet for smart people and smart companies as we were before the pandemic. I strongly believe that the fundamentals which had Toronto in the top echelon of world cities, those fundamentals are still there, and they will allow us to recover with strength. While I regret that Sidewalk is no longer pursuing the Quayside project, I am heartened by the fact that Sidewalk and Google, both of them, will be, and the latter, and Google, employing hundreds of Toronto residents, will both remain in Toronto and both will be a part of our strong innovation and tech sector. In fact, I corresponded with the Chief Financial Officer of Alphabet Google today, who confirmed their continuing commitment to Toronto. Sometimes business deals just don't end up happening. We've seen more of this than usual during the course of the pandemic, but we still have a tremendous opportunity, a new opportunity, in fact, to develop Quayside at a time when we're doing everything we can and will continue to do everything we can to attract new jobs, build new housing, including affordable housing, and cause investment to occur in our city. The Quayside site is still there, it is still valuable, we still own it, and it remains a key untapped area of the city's waterfront. And I know there's going to be great enthusiasm about the prospect of having a chance to work with us and with Waterfront Corporation in developing it going forward. I'm extremely confident that there are partners out there eager to undertake this endeavour. I'll be pushing Waterfront Toronto, along with our provincial and federal partners, to make sure that the new Quayside that emerges will create new jobs and economic development opportunities, brings us a carbon-neutral neighbourhood with more housing, including affordable housing, as well as better transportation and sustainability features. The sidewalk experience helped us advance our approach both to the need for improved waterfront transportation and digital governance. These were positive byproducts from a negotiation that turned out to be unsuccessful. Our ultimate goal remains one of building a neighbourhood focused on innovation in Quayside that will be the envy of cities around the world and a beacon for the future. Toronto is the fastest growing city in North America, with one of the fastest growing tech and innovation sectors. I have seen our tech community rising to the challenges that the pandemic has created, and I'm confident that our city's tech and innovation success story will continue after the pandemic, and our overall global success story that is Toronto today will continue after the pandemic as well. Now that brings me to another crucially important file which has been occupying a good deal of my time in recent weeks. In order to make sure that Toronto, the country's national economic engine, comes back strong, our city, and for that matter cities across Canada, will need the support of the federal and provincial governments. 2 weeks ago, cities across the country appealed to the federal government for emergency funding. We need this support right now to keep frontline services going strong and to help cities drive Canada's economic recovery. The impact of the pandemic on Toronto's finances alone has been brutal as we lose record amounts of revenue while also spending on our comprehensive response to COVID-19, whether it be on additional support for the homeless, food access programs, or special care for the elderly. We've determined the COVID-19 pandemic is costing the city government here in Toronto $65 million a week. Some of that being lost revenue, $20 million plus a week just for the TTC, other parts of it being added expenses, which have contributed to this $65 million a week shortfall. We've kept the TTC running, as an example, so that frontline health workers and all essential workers can get to work and get home, but it does come at a financial cost to the city. As we said 2 weeks ago when we began this advocacy to the federal and provincial governments, we've crunched the numbers further and determined that a 3-month lockdown and a 6-month recovery period, not unreasonable assumptions, could cost the city as much as $1.5 billion. In fact, that's the best case scenario, $1.5 billion. Toronto and other cities across Canada are working flat out to help Canadians get through this. We are the people that are relied upon to deliver most of the services at the ground level to help people during the pandemic. We're turning hotels and community centres into shelter. We're deferring property taxes. We're delivering vital frontline services. Some of them we're expected to continue to deliver no matter what. Toronto Fire, paramedics, police, clean water, transit, and special measures for our most. And once again, you will hear me today call on the federal and provincial governments, but especially the federal government, to step forward and show the national leadership that others will follow and lead us in the effort to help cities, just as they have led, and quite properly so, and I commend them for it, in helping other groups and other sectors in our economy. We are calling for decisive national leadership to help cities during these unprecedented times. And provinces need to step forward too. Make no mistake about that. This is a national challenge, though, that needs to be taken seriously. It is a threat if the cities become financially unsustainable to our national economy and to our national economic recovery, which will be led by cities. Intergovernmental and jurisdictional wrangling must not and cannot stand in the way of supporting cities and giving them the support that they need now. Without emergency funding, we're out of acceptable options and time. This is the worst possible time to cut back on the kinds of frontline services that people are relying on more than ever. Shelving significant capital projects would reduce job opportunities. Not a good time. Nobody could pay the kinds of massive property tax increases we would need to impose in 2021 to make up for the cost of the pandemic. And enabling city debt won't work either. Cities would have no way to service that additional debt. Only the federal and provincial governments will see tax revenue growth from Canada's recovery. That is a point that I make all the time. Cities led by Toronto will make this recovery happen. And when it does, income tax revenues will rise. Corporate tax revenues will rise as more businesses do better. Sales tax revenues will rise as people, you out there, all of us, buy more things. But all of that revenue, all of it, every penny, of corporate income and sales tax revenue goes to the federal and provincial governments. So we will drive, as cities, the economic recovery, and the financial benefit will go to those governments. I'm not complaining about that. That's a subject for another day. What I am saying is that we need to have a share of that money. These governments need to make a bet that I believe is the most solid bet they could ever make, and they will get the returns. It's something that I would have called in business, again, to repeat something I've said before, a no-brainer. You give up some of this money now, and you will get it back later and in spades. We need immediate federal funding so that we can keep people safe and then be ready to drive Canada's economic recovery. Municipalities nationwide face a near-term gap of $10 to $15 billion, as identified by cities themselves, including Toronto, and catalogued in detail by the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. Those amounts assume physical distancing continues for up to 6 months, with municipal revenues impacted through to the end of 2020. So I join my big city mayor colleagues and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in calling for at least $10 billion in emergency federal operating funding in 2020. And this would include $7.6 billion in direct allocations for all municipalities based on population, and $2.4 billion for municipalities such as Toronto that have comprehensive transit systems based on ridership. To be effective nationwide, this funding should be straightforward, it should be direct, it should be flexible, and it should be timely, meaning the commitment should be made now. That means a single transfer that municipalities can use as needed with no matching funds required from the provinces, though they should participate. This transfer will need to be supplemented in some cases, including in the case of Toronto, which has borne extraordinary expenditure burdens looking after some of our most vulnerable populations. We have seen this in Toronto's case with literally tens of millions of dollars. We have invested, and it was the right thing to do to provide for proper shelter for those who need it, just to cite one example. We are turning to the federal government on this because it is time for national leadership to help cities. Our message is simply this. We have serious problems as cities. It is a national problem affecting all Canadian cities, and we simply can't afford to have constitutional or intergovernmental wrangling standing in the way of cities getting the help they need and the help that they need now. Strong cities were the key to Canada's economic success before the pandemic. Frontline city services are helping to fight the pandemic and saving thousands of lives right now. And cities will be absolutely crucial to Canada's economic recovery from COVID-19. And now I will call on our Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Eileen to give her report for today.
Thank you, Mayor Tory, and good afternoon. In today's update, there are a total of 249 new COVID-19 infections, and to date, 4,364 people have recovered from this virus. My team updates our local data regularly with daily online updates. I encourage you to visit our website for more details. Earlier today, our Board of Health held its first ever virtual meeting and discussed our local data and how it helps to inform our public health actions and COVID-19 response, critical work to support our most vulnerable communities and residents as the pandemic moves through our city, how to move from COVID-19 response to COVID-19 recovery, what we need to see in order to begin gradually easing our public health measures, why we will need to continue living with some of our public health measures until treatments or a vaccine are available, and why we must maintain our focus and our diligence in fighting this silent health threat in our community to not risk losing all of our hard work and sacrifices. We also discussed the best path forward is to strike the wisest balance between COVID-19 protective measures and meeting other health needs. This will rest on careful monitoring of our data so that we know when it is safe to gradually ease our public health measures and get back to enjoying the city we all love. During the board meeting, I shared that we are actively exploring ways to understand if COVID-19 is affecting certain groups in our community more so than others. As I shared earlier in the week, we know that emerging evidence from other jurisdictions suggests that COVID-19 is impacting some groups more than others, including certain ethno-racial groups and those with lower income levels. While the current provincial data system does not currently include socio-demographic and ethno-racial data, my team conducted a preliminary analysis of the data we have collected. And the preliminary findings suggest that COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations have been more commonly reported in areas of our city which have a higher proportion of low-income earners and recent immigrants. Today's Board of Health meeting was productive, and I am pleased to share that there was unanimous approval of a motion to support our COVID-19 response and recovery work. Through this motion, our Board of Health is requesting provincial and federal support to advance the city's important work on COVID-19 response and recovery, while continuing to address some of our most significant and most complex challenges, including housing affordability, access to social services, and how we use and share public space. I sincerely thank the Board of Health for all of their ongoing support so that we at Toronto Public Health can continue our work in protecting your health. Lastly, I would like to address some questions that I have been asked regarding why our messaging to the public is changing. Our goal has always been to reduce virus spread, prevent deaths, and mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on our city. In the early stages of the COVID-19 outbreak, we asked everyone to stay home and to only go out for essential needs. However, as we look forward now to the post-peak period of this outbreak, we are increasingly in a position to adjust our advice and our approach to fighting this virus. This means starting to relax some of our public health measures as long as physical distancing is maintained. To help illustrate this, for example, when someone has surgery, at first they must rest as much as possible and stay in bed as they recover. But as time progresses and their condition improves, they are asked to slowly and gradually return to their regular activities. This is the same kind of approach that we are taking here with COVID-19. I want to thank everyone once again for your commitment to our public health measures and to keeping our city safe during this pandemic. I know that it has not been easy, and you continue to make many personal sacrifices. We need to stay the course so that we do not undo all of your hard work and sacrifices. So please, continue to stay safe by practicing physical distancing when you go outside, and please continue to take care of each other. I will now hand it over to Chief Pegg.
Excuse me. Thank you, Dr. Davila. Good afternoon. Our Emergency Operations Centre continues to operate 7 days per week, ensuring that both critical and essential services are being provided without interruption. Toronto's Children's Services team is no exception. They are currently hard at work, providing child care for our essential service workers in order for them to continue providing the many services that our residents rely on each and every day in our city. Last week, the Province of Ontario requested that we begin expanded COVID-19 testing for childcare workers who are assigned to work in our emergency childcare centres. We responded immediately and began implementation of this additional testing, which strengthens the already comprehensive health and safety procedures and policies that are already in place. All City of Toronto emergency childcare workers, which includes approximately 300 staff assigned to our 7 emergency childcare centres, are in the process of being proactively tested for COVID-19. Toronto Public Health has been working with Toronto Children's Service and with the provincially operated COVID-19 testing centres to do all that we can to expedite this process. This includes making weekend and after-hours times available in order to get these essential service staff tested as quickly as possible. Our staff at both the Jesse Ketchum and Falstaff childcare centres have already been sent for testing. The remainder of our emergency childcare staff will complete their scheduled testing over the upcoming weekend and early next week. As of this morning, the testing results are as follows. In the Jesse Ketchum site, 13 staff have tested positive, 34 are negative, and 19 staff are awaiting the results of their tests. Additionally, also in Jesse Ketchum, 7 children have tested positive, 20 are negative, and approximately 30 children are awaiting the results of their testing. On April 29, the Jesse Ketchum site was closed for a 2-week period and remains closed at this time. Service at this location will resume on a date to be determined in accordance with the recommendation and advice of Toronto Public Health. In the Falstaff site, 1 staff member has tested positive and 5 staff members are still awaiting results. There are no children showing any symptoms or signs of COVID-19 infection, and as such, none are being tested at this time. The Falstaff location continues to operate, although 1 room where the staff member who has tested positive has been closed until further notice. Both the 6 staff members and the 6 children who had been based in this room are self-isolating at home for 14 days. As we outlined yesterday, work is also ongoing to ensure that our city is prepared as additional retail stores begin to reopen. We have convened a number of teams who are working to assist Toronto business owners and operators in implementing the public health guidelines and protocols in order for our city's retail sector to operate in as safe a manner as possible. Further, many proactive programs are continuing to scale up, including CurbTO. The CurbTO team is implementing a number of street interventions that include curb lane pedestrian zones and temporary parking pickup zones. These interventions are designed to facilitate effective physical distancing and enhance safety on our sidewalks and streets. We have implemented 21 of these interventions thus far. Our team in the EOC is working in direct collaboration with Toronto Public Health in order to implement the public health measures that will be required to protect both our residents and our staff. Each of the relevant city divisions and agencies continue to be fully connected and are working together on these important issues. Our strategic command team continues to ensure that the City of Toronto's response to COVID-19 remains timely, coordinated, and effective. I'm extremely proud of our team that continues to go above and beyond in service to our city in these unprecedented times. In closing, I continue to remind everyone that toronto.ca/COVID-19 is the best source for reliable and timely information on COVID-19 in Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. On the line with us for the reporters who are waiting to ask questions, we have Marianne Bedard from our Shelter Support and Housing Group, Barbara Gray from Transportation Services, and Paul Raftis from Senior Services and Long-Term Care. First question is to Lucas Meyer from News Talk 1010. Go ahead, Lucas.
Thank you very much, Brad. Mayor, given the financial situation, is the plan still no layoffs, and are you ruling out any potential tax increases to mitigate this?
Well, I can tell you that what we have chosen to do, and we've done it with the cooperation, and I'm thankful for that, of our major unions, Local 79 of QP and Local 416, is to put in place a emergency leave provision, which causes different results for different groups of people, but those, for example, who decline the opportunity to have themselves redeployed would go on to what amounts to unemployment insurance and would not receive any top-up. Others who agree to be redeployed but for whom there is no position would receive a top-up to 75% of their normal pay. So this has largely avoided layoffs per se, but it has some people in different circumstances. Their positions are preserved, but they're not receiving their full salary during the course of the pandemic. So that is our hope, is to continue to have those arrangements in place and obviously to minimize the impact on our employees, most of whom continue to be very much occupied delivering the services that you've heard us refer to. With respect to the subject of tax increases, I would only say that we had already put in our budget this year a modest tax increase, plus another modest one to take account of longer-term needs on housing, affordable housing, and transit, and that I think it is a bad time to contemplate other tax increases for the people of Toronto, many of whom are struggling to pay other bills, and so I think that that is why we're looking for support from the federal and provincial governments, and I think quite properly so, to make up for the revenue shortfall that we've experienced as a result of this global pandemic.
And as you mentioned, the request to the feds was 2 weeks ago. Is there actually any indication that support's on the way?
It's been under active discussion. They point to the provinces under our Constitution having exclusive jurisdiction over cities, which is true. And so I think there is a bit of a discussion going on as to exactly who should bear what share of this responsibility. But the response has not been to say no, never ever on the part of either of the two governments. And so I'm optimistic that they're going to come to some resolution to this that hopefully is satisfactory, partly because they know it's right to rebuild the economy of the country, which will happen starting in cities, and because they know that they will get most of the money back from that in income taxes, corporate taxes, and sales taxes. The cities don't get that, but the cities will lead in the recovery. So I think there will be a positive result, but I can't say there has been one as yet.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Francine Copen now from the Toronto Star. Francine?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm looking forward to Monday when more businesses are allowed to open, and I'm wondering whether stores and malls that have street frontage are included. Will they be allowed to open?
Do you know the answer to that question?
No, I was, my understanding is that under the provincial order, they're talking about stores that actually have a street front entrance, but that's as far as my understanding is. That might be a question that's better directed towards our provincial counterparts.
Yeah, I understand the question.
Okay.
There are stores that are in malls and also have a street front entrance, but whether they're covered by this, I honestly don't know either, and I think the medical officer is right. We should have that question directed to the province as to the intention of their order.
Okay, and is this going to complicate enforcement? I guess this question is for Chief Pegg, because you've got so many more variables at play here. I mean, businesses can and can't open. The definition is becoming more complicated.
Yeah, thanks, Francine. And excuse me, as you said, it is getting a little bit more complicated, but I will say that immediately upon becoming aware of the change in provincial direction, our teams were assembled. That was in an afternoon. They worked well into that night and are in fact working on a nearly 24-hour clock now. We are fully connected with all of our enforcement partners, including municipal licensing and standards, Toronto Police and others. And I can tell you that literally as we're sitting at this press conference, there's a team of people working diligently to fully understand definitions, as you said, both definitions of retail and certain intricacies in the orders, and produce a plan, if you will, to properly enforce. But I'll reinforce, as you've heard us say throughout, our goal is never to move all the way to enforcement first. Our goal is to, of course, work with all of our business owners and business partners to provide the necessary education and to support them in what very clearly is a business owner and operator's responsibility to comply with the orders as it pertains to reopening their business. So we're working diligently to provide that guidance and assistance. Of course, enforcement will be there on an as-required basis, but like you've seen throughout, we'll move to educate and assist first.
May I make a comment on that? And really just to put a very fine point on something the Chief just said, which is that, you know, long before we get to enforcement, hopefully we never have to, there are two groups of people that I think have to bear responsibility here. And the first and foremost is business. And I say this with a great sense of joy that they're going to get a chance to partially reopen their businesses. But as the grocery stores have shown, for example, who are open throughout, that they can successfully ensure physical distancing through steps they take with lineups and steps they take inside the store. And the second group is people themselves, who have to show a sense of personal responsibility as we begin to reopen the economy. It's going to be a good test of whether people will themselves make sure that they line up in a way that is showing physical responsibility, physical separation and distancing, and continue to do so in their approach to the entrance of the store. And I think that's going to be a great test for all of us and a very important one.
Okay, thank you. We go to Mark McAllister now from City News. Mark?
Mayor Tory, if you would, it seems to be a bit of a shift from working closely together with the other levels of government on the response to pushing for that help during the recovery period. Have you been given indication that the help isn't going to come? Are we back to business as usual when it comes to working with those other levels of government, so to speak?
Well, working with the other levels of government is always a challenge in this country because we have two other ones and because we are, in some respects, legislative creatures of the provincial government in the case of all the cities, notwithstanding the fact that Toronto is the economic engine responsible for 20% of the GDP of the country and is bigger than many of the provinces in the country. And so it is occasionally frustrating, but the bottom line is that these governments over time have often come forward with support we needed on transit, on housing and other things. And I think now the sensibility of what we need here and what good it's going to do to have us lead in the economic recovery, the returns from which will go to those other governments, will cause a positive response to happen, but it never happens easily, and we're working away at it. And as I've said it previously, no one has yet said no, but they also haven't said yes. And so I'm working very hard with my fellow mayors to make sure we get to yes, which is going to be good for Canada and good for the cities.
Thank you. And a question for Dr. Davila. This morning in the Board of Health meeting, you had mentioned that the reproduction of cases is starting to drift up a little bit. Is this an indication the downward trend is actually reversing and we're going to see more spread? And how much does reopening things and getting out play into that?
Well, we certainly hope that that doesn't become a trend. I think what I explained to the board this morning is that we do see some increase with respect to new COVID-19 cases and the number of the next generation of cases that they're giving rise to. We will have to continue to monitor our data. This is an important role that we play within local public health, to determine whether, in fact, we should proceed with easing of public health measures or slow things down. This is exactly what recovery looks like, and it's exactly what you should expect from us as your local public health department. So watching the data constantly and making sure that the actions that we're taking are consistent with the circumstances that are in front of us and therefore appropriate.
Okay, we'll go to Mark Douglas now from 680 News. Mark?
Thanks, Brad. A question for Mayor Tory regarding Sidewalk Labs. Given how yourself, Premier Ford, and the Chair of Waterfront Toronto have already issued statement and already talking about how you're looking forward to whatever comes next for Quayside, and also given that there were so many privacy concerns around the Sidewalk Lab digital project, now is it necessarily a bad thing that this project has in fact disappeared? Many people in Toronto might actually be happy to see it go.
You never get 100% agreement on anything when you're sitting in positions like mine or that of the Premier. You come to accept that. I saw the sidewalk opportunity as something that was exciting for Toronto in the context of urban innovation and many other things. But there were concerns from the beginning about it that caused some other people not to be as happy about it. I think we actually made real progress on a digital framework that respected privacy and respected the ownership and stewardship of information. But having said that, that deal's not going forward now, and I think it does leave us, since we own this very attractive piece of land and have a new opportunity now to start over, as it were, and to address all of these concerns. We've learned what some of them are, and we'll go forward, and I think we will take full advantage of the opportunity to take this great site in a great city full of great people, and we will have somebody, a number of people, I'm sure, that will come forward and want to do something very exciting on that location.
And the follow-up question then, Mayor, you sort of segued into my follow-up here. In your mind, what is the next best option for Quayside?
You know, we rely on the creativity of the private and for that matter, the public sector, our educational institutions and so on to come forward with something that is exciting. I can tell you our goals, which are to make sure that we do something that is innovative, that has housing, affordable housing included in particular, that has all kinds of things that make it a very, very sustainable community among the leaders in the world, that encourages all kinds of transportation to make sure that that part of the waterfront is better served. So these will be the kinds of objectives we'll be seeking, as we were before. We'll just now be dealing with a different group of people, and I'm sure there'll be many people who want to come forward and help us make that reality happen on what is one of the most valuable, sought-after waterfronts anywhere in the world.
Okay, thank you. We go to Derek Durain now from CBC. Derek?
Thanks, Brad. So this first question is towards Mayor Tory, and perhaps Dr. Davila as well can answer this. Mayor Tory, you've talked about opening up streets so people can safely distance, but what about some of the bigger parks like High Park or Ontario Place? I mean, I know that other city parks are still open, and you've closed some of the bigger green spaces in the downtown core, which seems to have pushed more people to crowd places that are open, like the Lakefront Trail. So considering the risk of outside transmission being low, why aren't things moving faster?
Well, Ontario Place is not under our jurisdiction. It belongs to the province, and they will do with Ontario Place what they think is best. To my knowledge, we did not close parks and green spaces in the City of Toronto. What we did is we placed some restrictions on some of the recreational amenities because at that time, and it's always subject to constant review, as I've said, the risk of having the virus put onto some of the equipment or some of the playground equipment was something that was deemed to be real enough that it was prudent to close those spaces. And I'm sure that they will be reopened over time, but the parks have always remained open, albeit with a restriction that people should stay 2 meters apart from one another. So the notion that we've closed parks is not correct, and we will be looking to open them, but we'll be looking to open them based on the medical advice, which is something that Dr. Davila and her colleagues are looking at every single day.
That's right. So if I can just add to that, you know, that is part of our recovery plan with COVID-19. As we move from response to recovery, we need to think about how we promote activity within our city while at the same time promoting physical distancing as part of our efforts to live safely as a community with COVID-19 in our midst.
And may I say
And
as
just
well,
to follow up,
can I just say
sorry,
as well
go
on
ahead.
that, part of the objective, as was outlined yesterday, of having some of the streets around some of the parks, the problem, if there's been one at all, has been with regard to capacity in the parks to have people on a physically distanced basis. And some of the steps we said we would be taking yesterday, subject to details being revealed next week, are specifically to make sure we create more space at the perimeter of those parks so that people will be in a position to both enjoy the parks and the surrounding areas in a physically distanced manner.
Thanks for the clarification, Mayor Tory. And just to follow up, earlier you had touched on getting funding for the federal government in regards to the financial impact that this pandemic has had on the city. Based on your conversations with the TTC specifically, what have they said are their needs funding-wise?
Well, they're very focused on transit, and in fact, part of the ask we made was specifically about transit based on ridership, which is something that is extremely important to the City of Toronto that has 1.6 million transit riders every single day. I will just say to you that none of the requests made by us directly or through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has been either accepted or rejected. So in that sense, I see the issue is still very live. I have phone calls set up through the rest of this week with various people, including my fellow mayors. I talked to the Mayor of Montreal today. I'll be talking to mayors tomorrow. I'll be talking to ministers of the governments tomorrow. So it's something, as I said, that's taking up a lot of my time, and I think we'll end up in the right place or close to the right place. But that's something that lies ahead of us, and it's a major and very important challenge for our success as cities, but also for our recovery as a country.
I move to Matt Bingley now from Global News. Matt, go ahead.
Thanks, Brad. Mayor Tory, I'm just wondering, you talked about with Sidewalk Labs that that Alphabet has told you that some of their staff would be remaining here. I'm just wondering if you give a little bit more detail in that. Did they give any timelines where they would maintain staffing levels, and for how long, and if they're going to be remaining in that location, or does the city just boot them out now that they're not in the Quayside location?
I'm not sure what will happen with regard to the office space and the kind of demonstration center they've been occupying, but I will say this. Mr. Doctoroff, the CEO of Sidewalk, told me himself this morning on the telephone that they'll be maintaining an office here because they like Toronto. They find Toronto a very exciting place in which to do business. And quite frankly, I told him I hope they'll be looking for deals to do here that may work out, which this one did not. In the case of Alphabet, they employ through Google and through Sidewalk literally hundreds of Torontonians, and the chief financial officer made it clear to me this morning in writing that their commitment to Toronto and their enthusiasm about Toronto remains, and that is good news. We've been after them to continue to expand their presence here, especially through Google, and we will continue with those efforts because we think we're a good home for them and for their employees, and I know that will continue into the future.
And Mayor Tory, I'm just also wondering if you worry that this reflects poorly on the city as a place to do business, in the sense that it's a place where Google has said that they just can't make a financial run at it.
It takes two to make a deal, and often deals are very complicated, and there's not any one particular reason, and this one failed to come to a successful conclusion in the midst of one of the worst health pandemics that the world has ever seen. And there's lots of things that are not happening or that are happening in a different way today than was the case 6 months ago. And so I think that if you look at what the Sidewalk people have said in the aftermath of this deal not happening, if you look at the continued commitment by Alphabet, Google to the city, I think that people will understand there were a lot of factors involved in all of this, and a lot of people who are involved in business in any capacity understand as well. There are many, many, many deals that don't get the attention this one got, that don't happen every day. People take a good try at it. Everybody acted in good faith here, and I will say that, and they just don't happen because you can't come to an agreement, and that is not anything that damages the reputation of Toronto or Google Sidewalk for that matter. It's just a deal that didn't happen. One will happen in the future. This is a great piece of land in one of the great cities of the world, and I think we're going to make it happen, and people continue to have great faith in the city around the world and want to come here and will come here again as soon as the borders are open again.
Okay, thanks. We'll go to Dave Ryder now from the Toronto Star. Dave, go ahead.
Hi, Mayor Tory. Can you tell me, given that the Sidewalk Lab Quayside arrangement was never supposed to be just sort of a real estate play, but they seem to have flagged real estate values in Toronto along with the global economic downturn. As a result, you talked to Dan Doctoroff. What is your understanding of exactly why they are pulling out of this deal?
Well, there's a wide range of factors, and I think based on what he said to me in person, they're covered quite well in the statement that was issued by Sidewalk, and it includes global conditions after the pandemic, and it includes their concerns about the Toronto's real estate market. But make no mistake that while this wasn't solely to be about real estate, in fact, it wasn't about real estate at all, we also were having to make sure we protected the interests of the residents of the City of Toronto in allocating over to them, if this deal had proceeded, one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the city. And so that was clearly an issue, but was it the only issue? By no means. There were just a number of issues, and I've seen this all the time in my experience as a business leader. There are lots and lots and lots of deals. They don't get as much attention as this one that are contemplated, that are negotiated, that are attempted by enterprises in this city every single day that don't happen. And there are lots that do. And I'm optimistic going forward we'll do a great deal for Quayside. It's going to create jobs. It's going to be a center of innovation. This one didn't happen, and it was no reflection on anybody. It was just one of those deals that just didn't happen.
Okay, and follow up on the same topic is that, we assume at some point the different governments in Waterfront Toronto are going to go back to the drawing board and maybe have a new competition. Do you think what lessons should be learned from this if you're going to do a different RFP or maybe try and avoid some of the pitfalls we had, because it was pretty fraught 2.5 years? Is there anything we should do differently? And also, I guess, given what we know about the pandemic will change things about live workspace and things. What should be different this time around?
I think that the process certainly got off to a rocky start in terms of how the thing was governed. There was controversy about that, and one of the worst things when you're trying to do a deal, and I know this from my own experience, momentum is very important. And if you get off to a rocky start because there's a lot of questions raised by process, this can impede the deal itself. And maybe that was a factor here going all the way back to that beginning that was fairly rocky. I think we learned a lot about digital governance and protection of privacy. And I think that the framework that was in place now is something that will be helpful to us in another round with another group of people, because there's no question that data now produced by technology, which will be an important part of any new neighborhood that we put together, especially one that's going to be really sustainable and really, a world leader, is going to be very important. I think we learned a lot about transportation and the fact that that's of paramount importance to make this part of the city work properly. So, while I'm disappointed this deal didn't proceed, I think we learned a lot from it. We learned about process, we learned about other substantive things, and it'll better position us to what I'm sure will be a very robust competition among a lot of people, both from here at home and from perhaps elsewhere, who will see this for what it is. One of the most valuable pieces of real estate, one of the most exciting opportunities in one of the world's most successful cities, and none of that has changed because of the pandemic. And so I think we'll come back stronger than ever after this is over, and with a great deal of interest in the Quayside property.
Okay, final question to Josh Rubin from the Toronto Star. Go ahead, Josh.
Hey guys, I promise Star people do actually talk to each other. So, but we're all here. We're all here. So, I guess this question is for either the chief or the mayor. Point taken about businesses and customers needing to take some responsibility for stuff, but given how densely packed some of the retail corridors are in this city, how concerned are you about kind of, the potential for, large crowds or even smaller crowds bumping into each other? I mean, like there's, 2 stores side by each, and, whose line takes priority? I mean, stuff like that. And what are some ways to kind of get around that?
Well, Josh, I can start, and the mayor can fill in the blanks, if you will. So, as I explained, immediately upon becoming aware of the change in provincial direction, our teams assembled. And I will say we are very fortunate in this city to have the expertise and the robust teamwork that is happening. It just so happens that now that's co-located largely electronically, but co-located from a connected sense in the EOC. Under normal circumstances, of course, we would be here in this building, but that team is working very diligently together. All of that analysis is happening. We're in a very robust and a very responsive position in that those assessments are being made. It's being fed into the teams, and very robust solutions are being produced. And by way of example, I can say I'll reference back to in my remarks when I talked about the CurbTO initiative. There are already a number of installations. There are more than 80 sites that have been proactively identified, and the work is ongoing. And that includes a number of different things, from providing some assistance to business owners on how they may achieve appropriate physical distancing, all the way down to looking after very core and very basic needs, like ensuring that when we do curb TO installations, that we're protecting and installing asphalt ramps to make sure that we continue to be an accessible city. So all of that work is happening. It will continue to happen, and we will, of course, provide the utmost of expertise and advice and assistance we can to our business community. But as you said, where it all comes down to is a shared responsibility on the part of the business owners to comply with the regulations, and on each one of us to behave and perform in a responsible manner.
I'll just add the following to this. First of all, I'm very hopeful that this will show us all as a bit of a demonstration project some of the complexities that exist in downtown Toronto in particular, but in a big city like this of 3 million people generally. And I think the Premier acknowledged yesterday, he recognized that, and I hope that as we go forward we'll have as much notice as possible to make some of these arrangements and so on. The second point I'll make is this. I really believe business, who are now not allowed to let people into their stores but are allowed to process orders and deliver them curbside, can use their ingenuity to make arrangements such that maybe there's never a lineup. If you think about it, they could arrange with people who bought a pair of shoes or whatever they're buying to make an appointment to pick up their goods, and they could make appointments for different people at different times throughout the day. They could, make sure that people are coming down in different waves and picking up their stuff, other than by making appointments. So I think there are ways in which business can use its ingenuity to make sure that there aren't lineups and that there aren't points of congestion. And we, in turn, will make sure that to the extent we can provide more space to keep people safe and healthy on the sidewalks and making whatever steps we need to take on other forms of transportation to do that, that will be done, as we've proven with the Curb TO project. So I think we can do well at this, and I think we will do well at this, and we'll see starting Monday.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you very much, Josh, and thank you all for joining us. That concludes today's media briefing. We'll be here again tomorrow at 3:45. Have a safe evening.